My name is Myra Hutton. I am 42 years old, and 3 weeks ago, I sold my commercial farming enterprise for $10.5 million. Then, acting on the calculated advice of my husband, I called my parents and my sister and informed them that I had gone completely bankrupt. What they executed next, within mere hours, not days, proved a terrifying truth that my husband had suspected for 15 long years. And what transpired at my parents' formal anniversary dinner in front of 40 invited guests is the exact reason I will never pick up a telephone for any of them ever again. To understand how a daughter reaches the point of absolute, unyielding severance, I have to take you back to a chilly Tuesday morning in March, the exact day I signed the legal documents that changed my financial life forever. The attorney's office smelled faintly of stale coffee and fresh printer ink. I sat across the polished desk from Douglas Whitfield, watching a thick stack of legal contracts fanned out between us, and I signed my name 14 separate times. Each signature formally transferred another piece of my life's work, my 800 acres of certified organic soil, my lucrative distribution contracts with 3 regional supermarket chains, my state-of-the-art packing facility, and my family name, over to Meridian Agricorp. My husband, Marcus, sat quietly beside me. The moment my pen lifted from the final page, his hand reached under the table, found mine, and offered a firm, reassuring squeeze. He didn't utter a word, he didn't need to. $10.5 million. 20 years ago, that land was nothing more than a weed-choked, dead strip of heavy clay that my father handed over to me like an insult, a mere consolation prize. My older sister, Jocelyn, was gifted the prime, fertile parcel, 60 acres located directly near the main highway with full county water access. She sold her land within 12 months for a quick $180,000, burning through the cash on a luxury European vacation, and an oversized down payment on a suburban house she couldn't afford. I was left with the dirt nobody wanted. I taught myself soil chemistry from old library books, borrowed $40,000 from a local farm credit union at a brutal 9% interest rate, and spent my first 3 winters sleeping inside a drafty camper trailer with no heat because every single dollar I earned had to go back into the soil. Nobody in my family helped me. Nobody came to check on me, not my mother, not my father, and certainly not Jocelyn. But they showed up later. They always showed up later, the moment the money started flowing. Douglas slid the final deed across the desk, and as I placed my last signature on the page, he shook my hand firmly. "Congratulations, Mrs. Hutton," he said with deep professional respect. "You have built something truly remarkable out of nothing." Then he lowered his voice, leaning in slightly. "If I may offer one piece of advice, be extraordinarily careful about who you tell." Marcus offered a silent nod, looking as if he had been waiting for months to hear those exact words from a lawyer. On the quiet drive home, Marcus turned off the truck radio and looked at me across the bench seat. "Before you call your mother to share any news, Myra," he said gently, "I need you to sit down with me and hear me out." We sat at our wooden kitchen table that evening, and Marcus pulled out a yellow legal pad. On the top line, he had written a single, staggering number, $347,000. That is the exact amount of cash, paid utility bills, home repairs, and loans you have quietly given your family over the last 15 years, Marcus explained softly. "I have tracked every single dollar." I stared at the column of numbers in disbelief. "Marcus, last winter my mother called me in tears," I stammered, trying to justify it. "She needed $15,000 for an emergency roof replacement." Marcus calmly flipped the page. "2 weeks after you wired her that money, Myra, I saw her Facebook photos from a luxury Caribbean cruise." I opened my mouth to defend her, but he kept going line by line. $8,000 for Brianna's private fall tuition. Jocelyn posted a photo of a new designer handbag on Instagram that exact same week, with an identical price tag, claiming it was a gift from Todd. "And when you broke your collarbone in that terrible tractor accident 3 years ago, not a single member of your family came to help you harvest. Yet your mother called the very next week asking for a deposit on a new car. The kitchen went completely silent save for the slow drip of the sink faucet. If you tell them about the $10.5 million, Marcus said, looking me dead in the eyes, they will suddenly be wonderful to you. They will call you every day, they will bring you flowers, and you will live the rest of your life never knowing if a single drop of their affection is real. I leaned back in my chair, deeply hurt. They are my parents, Marcus. I know, he replied softly. That is why this matters so much. Tell them you went bankrupt. Tell them the bank foreclosed and took the land. Then just wait and watch. If I am proven wrong, I will drive you to their house myself and apologize on my knees. I looked down at 15 years of itemized financial exploitation. Not once in that long list had my mother or father ever called simply to ask how I was doing. If I am wrong, I whispered, I want to apologize to you. Marcus reached across the table, taking my cold hands in his. I know you want to be wrong, Myra. I truly do. The following morning, I sat on the edge of my bed with my phone, scrolling back through old text threads to find my father's contact. I hadn't called him directly in months. It was always my mother who initiated contact, and always when a bill was due. That was when I noticed a notification from a family group chat that I had been quietly removed from 8 months prior. A secondary group chat I didn't even realize existed until a glitch in my messaging app restored the archived thread. It was an active conversation between Jocelyn and my mother. 11 months ago, Jocelyn had typed, "Just call her and cry on the phone. She always sends the wire when you cry." My mother's response, sent 3 minutes later, read, "I know. I'll tell her the roof is leaking again next week." I read those messages twice, then a third time, my heart pounding against my ribs. This wasn't an occasional, desperate ask from a struggling parent. This was a coordinated, practice scheme designed around my inability to say no to my mother's tears. Scrolling further back, the evidence grew worse. Jocelyn asking my mother which emotional story to use next, my mother advising her to wait until after my fall harvest, when I had liquid cash, and my mother explicitly coaching Jocelyn on how to phrase her daughter's tuition requests so they sounded life or death urgent. 15 years, $347,000, and they maintained an active playbook to extract money from me. My hands shook so violently I had to set the phone flat on the mattress. I didn't cry. Something fundamental inside my spirit didn't break, it rearranged itself with icy precision. I walked downstairs into the kitchen where Marcus was pouring coffee. He took one look at my pale face and set the pot down. "I am making the calls now," I told him. He nodded silently. I dialed my mother first, placing the call on speakerphone. She answered on the second ring. "Myra." "Oh, sweetheart, I was just thinking about you." Her voice came through, warm and cheerful, the exact tone she used right before asking for a financial favor. "Mom, I need to tell you something serious," I said, forcing my voice to tremble slightly. "The farm, the bank foreclosed on everything. I owed far more than the land was worth. I had to sell the equipment and surrender the deed just to cover the debt. I lost everything." An absolute, heavy silence fell over the line, not the silence of a mother absorbing tragic news about her daughter's livelihood, but the calculating silence of an accountant reviewing a cancelled account. "What do you mean?" my mother asked flatly. "What about the $15,000 I asked you for next month?" I closed my eyes tightly, feeling the sharp sting of total clarity. "I don't have any money, Mom. I am completely bankrupt." She let out a long, heavy, irritated sigh, the exact sound she used to make when I accidentally spilled milk as a child. "Let me talk to your father about this. I'll call you back later." She didn't ask if Marcus and I had a place to live. She didn't ask how we were going to afford food. She simply hung up the phone, ending the call. The very first thought my mother possessed upon learning her daughter had lost her entire life's work was the loss of her next cash payment. I immediately dialed my sister, Jocelyn. "You're joking, right?" Jocelyn snapped the moment I repeated the story. "Brianna's private school tuition is due next month, Myra. How am I supposed to pay that?" "I am so sorry, Jocelyn, but I have literally lost everything," I said softly. "You are so incredibly selfish," she yelled into the phone. "You always find a way to make everything all about you." The line went dead as she slammed the phone down. I set my phone on the table. Marcus sat across from me, his hands flat on the wood, watching me with deep empathy. Neither of them asked if I was okay, I whispered. Marcus didn't answer. The devastating truth sat between us like a heavy stone. Suddenly, my phone chimed with a flurry of notifications from the original family group chat, the main chat that I was still officially added to. I opened the thread, and my stomach dropped. My mother had typed first, "Myra lost the entire farm. Bankrupt." I always said letting her run that operation alone was a massive mistake. Jocelyn responded 2 minutes later, "I knew that stupid farm would fail eventually. She should have gone to a real college like I did." My brother-in-law Todd chimed in, "So where does that leave Brianna's tuition money?" My father offered 0 words in my defense. His name sat quietly at the top of the chat, reading every message without uttering a single word to protect his youngest daughter. Then my mother typed in all capital letters, "Nobody lend her a single dime. She did this to herself." Jocelyn added a final message, "Honestly, she's been throwing money around for years pretending to be something she's not." This was bound to happen. Throwing money around, the $347,000 that had paid for their roofs, their cars, and their children's private schools. I methodically screenshot every single message, saving the files to a cloud drive. I wasn't acting out of immediate rage. I needed indisputable proof that the people who raised me were actively celebrating my financial demise. The following afternoon, my mother called my phone again. Her tone was carefully measured, the polished voice she used when delivering bad news she had decided was someone else's fault. "Sweetheart, about your father's and my 40th anniversary dinner next Saturday, at the Rosewood Grill." "What about it, Mom?" "Well, your father and I have been discussing it, and we think it's probably best if you and Marcus sit this one out." I gripped the edge of the kitchen counter tightly. "You are uninviting me from your anniversary dinner." "Don't phrase it like that, Myra," she sighed. "You are going through a humiliating financial situation right now. People in town will ask questions, and I simply don't want the celebratory mood ruined." My mother wasn't worried about my emotional pain. She was terrified that my supposed bankruptcy would stain her perfect public image in front of 40 high society guests. "I understand, Mom," I said flatly. "It's just one dinner. We'll do something small together later, just family." Just family, a phrase that sounded completely hollowed out. 2 days before the anniversary event, Jocelyn arrived at my house unannounced. She didn't knock. She walked straight through the side door wearing a new pair of designer boots. "We need to talk, Myra," she stated, crossing her arms in my kitchen. "You say you're bankrupt, fine. But you still own this house and the surrounding lot. Sell it and give Mom and me our fair share." "My share?" I asked, setting my dish towel down. "Mom and Dad raised you. They put clothes on your back. You owe this family," she demanded. Marcus walked into the kitchen, his voice low and firm. "Jocelyn," she said, "no. Leave our house immediately." Jocelyn sneered at him, claiming it was an internal family matter, before turning back to me. "Mom and Dad think you're secretly hiding money from us anyway." They hadn't come to offer comfort, they had come to accuse me of hoarding wealth. That evening, my father called me directly. His voice sounded tired, worn down by decades of enabling my mother's demands. Myra. Jocelyn says you are refusing to help the family. Dad, I lost my farm. I am bankrupt, and you are calling me because Jocelyn is upset. Silence echoed over the line. Dad, when I broke my collarbone in the tractor rollover 3 years ago, did you or Mom ever come to help me? My father remained silent for a long moment before muttering, "You know how your mother gets." "I'm just asking if you came, Dad," I repeated. He hung up the phone without answering. On Friday afternoon, Loretta Briggs, a 75-year-old retired schoolteacher, who had lived 3 properties down from my farm for 40 years, drove up my driveway carrying a fresh cherry pie. Loretta was an pillar of our town, a woman who spoke rarely at community meetings, but whose words carried immense weight because she was always honest. She sat on my porch, set the pie down, and listened as I laid out the entire truth: the $10.5 million farm sale, the fake bankruptcy test, the group chat screenshots, the uninvitation from the anniversary dinner, and the vicious rumors my mother was spreading at the local supermarket claiming I was ruined due to foolishness. Loretta listened without interrupting. When I finished, she looked out over the fields and said firmly, "I have watched your mother bleed you dry for 20 years, Myra. Nobody can set your boundaries for you, child. That work belongs to you." She stood up to leave, looking back at me from the porch steps. "I will be sitting at table 3 right up front at the Rosewood Grill tomorrow night. Whatever you decide to do, I will be standing right beside you." Saturday morning arrived. While searching through archived farm emails for an old equipment receipt, I found a forwarded message sent from my father to my mother 6 months prior that I had completely overlooked. It was an inquiry letter from Meridian Agricorp addressed to the county assessor's office, asking about certified organic acreage in our area. A friend at the assessor's office had forwarded it to my father with a note: "Thought you should know somebody big is offering massive money for Myra's land." My father had forwarded the email directly to my mother with 0 text. 6 months ago, my parents knew a multi-million-dollar corporation was seeking to buy my farm for a life-changing sum, and they kept it completely secret from me so I wouldn't sell, realize my true net worth, and stop funding their lifestyle. I printed the email chain, folded the paper, and placed it inside my purse alongside the official $10.5 million sale receipt from Meridian Agricorp. I put on a simple dark blouse and my good leather boots. Marcus put on his navy suit jacket, looking at me in the bedroom mirror. "Are you ready for this, Myra?" he asked softly. I checked my purse one last time, looking at my reflection. "I am completely ready," I replied. "Let's go to dinner." The 12-minute drive to the Rosewood Grill was conducted in absolute silence, save for the hum of the truck tires against the damp asphalt. Outside the passenger window, the flat grey fields of Millfield stretched toward the low March horizon, passing the very 800 acres that I had labored over for 20 brutal years. Marcus kept both hands steady on the steering wheel, his jaw set with an unyielding resolve. When we pulled into the crowded gravel parking lot of the restaurant, the warm yellow light from the private banquet room spilled out across the cars. Through the large glass panes, I could see 40 invited guests milling about, neighbors, church members, my father's former colleagues from the grain cooperative, and local business owners. In the center of the room stood my mother, Patty Callahan, wearing her finest silk dress, moving seamlessly between tables with a glass of white wine, laughing with her hand resting dramatically on a friend's shoulder. She looked like the picture-perfect matriarch celebrating 40 years of a blissful marriage, surrounded by a community that admired her. Jocelyn was standing near the front of the room by a small wooden riser holding a wireless microphone, wearing an expensive new designer outfit, while her husband Todd nervously adjusted his sleeve cuffs nearby. I reached down into my leather purse, feeling the crisp, folded paper of the $10.5 million Meridian Agricorp bill of sale resting beside the printed email chain and the group chat screenshots. Marcus turned off the engine, turned to face me in the dim interior of the truck, and looked straight into my eyes. "Whatever happens when we walk through those doors, Myra," he said softly, "I am standing right beside you." I took a deep, steadying breath, opened the passenger door, and stepped out into the cold night air. The private dining room was loud with ambient conversation, the air heavy with the scent of roasted prime rib and expensive perfume. A massive vinyl banner hung across the back wall reading, "Congratulations on 40 years, Don and Patty." My mother spotted me the exact second I cleared the entryway doorway. Her practiced, radiant smile froze instantly for a fraction of a second, a fleeting glitch in her social mask, before she quickly forced her face back into an expression of polite, tragic sympathy. She leaned toward Jocelyn, whispering something out of the corner of her mouth, and I read my sister's sharp lip movements across the room. "I told you I invited her." My mother crossed the hardwood floor with her arms open wide for a theatrical, public embrace. "Myra. Oh, sweetheart, you actually came." She cooed loudly enough for nearby guests to hear, wrapping her arms around me. Her body was completely rigid against mine. "You look very nice, dear. Please, find a seat anywhere in the back." Marcus and I quietly navigated toward a small table near the curtain-side window. 2 tables away, sitting right up front at table 3, sat Loretta Briggs, flanked by Nancy Feldman and Barbara Jenkins. Loretta caught my eye, offered a single, slow, solid nod of her head, and remained seated with her hands folded neatly over her purse. Almost every face in that room belonged to someone I had known my entire life, people who had purchased fresh organic produce from my farm stand, neighbors who had passed my tractor on county roads, and church members who had watched me sweat in those fields for 2 decades. And every single one of them now believed I was a bankrupt failure, because my mother had spent the entire week spreading that exact narrative across town to protect her social standing. I could feel the heavy weight of their glances, the sympathetic tilts of their heads, and the hushed, pitying whispers exchanged over wine glasses. Nobody sat at our table except an elderly retired couple who offered a weak, tight smile. Marcus reached under the white tablecloth, taking my hand in a firm, grounding grip. "Stay steady," he whispered against the rim of his water glass. Jocelyn stepped onto the small wooden riser, tapped the top of the wireless microphone twice, and the room gradually quieted down. My mother took the microphone from her hand, stepping into the center of the spotlight with a folded index card in her hand. My father, Don Callahan, stood beside the elaborate 3-tiered anniversary cake, his hands clasped tightly in front of his belt, his chin tucked down in his default posture of passive submission. "Thank you all so very much for coming tonight to celebrate our 40 years together." My mother began, her voice echoing brightly through the room's speakers. 40 years. Can you even believe it? Polite laughter and warm applause rippled through the audience. Don and I have been so abundantly blessed in this life, with a beautiful home, lifelong friends, and 2 wonderful daughters. She gestured gracefully toward Jocelyn first. Our darling Jocelyn, our firstborn, a brilliant college graduate, and an incredible mother to our precious granddaughter, Brianna, who is already excelling at the top of her private school class. We could not possibly be prouder of her. Jocelyn beamed with pride, holding her head high while Todd put an arm around her waist. Then my mother's eyes flicked briefly toward the dark back corner where Marcus and I sat, her tone dropping into a flat, brief, almost dismissive register. "And Myra, our youngest, always such a hard worker out in the fields." That was the entirety of my acknowledgement. 20 years of relentless physical labor, building an organic agricultural empire that supplied 3 major regional supermarket chains, reduced to 5 words. A hard worker in the fields, the exact phrase a person uses to describe a draft horse. I felt Marcus's fingers tighten around mine. "Family means that we always stand together through every trial, no matter what," my mother declared dramatically, raising her wine glass high into the air. "To 40 years." The room echoed her toast, raising their glasses in unison. I calmly lifted my water glass, took a small sip, and set it down without a word. Across the room at table 3, Loretta Briggs did not raise her glass. She sat upright, staring at my mother with an expression of sharp, unyielding disapproval, the look of a veteran school teacher listening to a child lie with complete confidence. Jocelyn immediately reclaimed the microphone before the applause even faded, her face glowing with self-importance. "While we are all gathered here celebrating Mom and Dad," Jocelyn announced loudly, "Todd and I have a wonderful little surprise of our own to share with everyone." The room leaned in with curious anticipation. "We just put down a massive cash deposit on a brand new, custom-built home in Maple Ridge." Gasps of admiration and loud applause erupted across the tables. Maple Ridge was the most exclusive, expensive residential development in the county, a gated neighborhood of 3-car garages and manicured lawns. Buying into Maple Ridge was the ultimate public symbol of wealth in Millfield. My mother covered her mouth with both hands, letting out a dramatic gasp of joy, pulling Jocelyn into a tight hug. I watched the performance from the back. Jocelyn did not possess the financial resources for a Maple Ridge estate. Todd managed a modest retail building supply store. They had leased their vehicles for years. And a mere 3 months ago, Jocelyn had begged me for $8,000, claiming she couldn't afford her daughter's school tuition without my charity. Now, she was publicly boasting about purchasing a $750,000 house. Then Jocelyn turned her eyes directly toward my table, holding the microphone tight, her voice carrying a sickening layer of performative, condescending pity. "And I want to say something special to my little sister, Myra. Myra, I know that things have been extraordinarily hard and tragic for you lately with your farm failing, and I want you to know right now in front of everyone, when Todd and I move into our new estate, you and Marcus are welcome to rent our old house. We'll even give you a family discount." A collective murmur of deep, emotional sympathy swept through the room. People touched their hearts, and a woman at a nearby table actually wiped a tear from her eye, whispering about how wonderfully generous Jocelyn was. I sat perfectly motionless in my chair. That was the singular reason I had been re-invited to this dinner. Not out of familial love, and certainly not out of guilt. Jocelyn desperately needed me in that room as the bankrupt, broken younger sister so that her own financial announcement would shine infinitely brighter. I was the dark shadow designed to make her look like a benevolent savior, the public failure that validated her success. I offered a cold, serene smile, nodded my head once, and said softly across the room, "Thank you, Jocelyn." Under the table, Marcus leaned close to my ear, his breath warm against my cheek. "Now you know with absolute certainty." "Yes," I whispered back. "Now I know." 15 minutes later, as the formal toasts concluded and guests began moving toward the buffet line, Todd approached our table alone. He pulled out the empty chair beside me, sat down awkwardly, and angled his body away from the main room, as if attempting to make the interaction appear casual. "Hey, Myra, do you have a quick second?" he asked in a low voice. "Sure, Todd," I replied flatly. He reached inside his suit jacket, pulled out a folded legal document, and slid it across the white tablecloth toward me like a folded napkin. "This is just a routine legal formality," Todd muttered, avoiding Marcus's glare. "Jocelyn needs both daughters' signatures to use your parents' house as supplementary collateral for our new Maple Ridge mortgage. Your mom and dad have already signed their portions at the top." I unfolded the heavy paper. The official letterhead at the top read First Prairie Lending. The legal document formally authorized the bank to place a primary lien against 14 Birch Lane, my parents' residential home, as backup collateral for Jocelyn's new residential loan. My mother's signature was clearly executed at the bottom beside my father's shaky handwriting. The only signature line remaining blank was mine, as a potential contingent heir. They required my parents' home as leverage because their own credit was entirely insufficient. "It's just a simple formality," Todd urged nervously. "The bank requires all immediate family members to sign off if the parents are putting up their deed. Your parents are completely fine with it." I stared at the fresh ink on that document. My mother had signed away the deed to her own house that very morning. This was the absolute, unvarnished truth behind my sister's invitation. This was why Jocelyn had called me on Thursday night with her fake, rehearsed apology. They didn't re-invite me to reconcile, they re-invited me because they desperately needed my legal signature on a bank document to finance a luxury house they couldn't afford, using my parents' home as a bargaining chip. I picked up the paper, stood up from the table, and walked out into the center of the room. Marcus instantly rose and stood directly behind my right shoulder. The chatter in the dining room began to quiet down as people noticed me standing in the aisle holding the document. "I am not signing this document, Todd," I announced, my voice carrying clearly across the quieted room. Jocelyn crossed the hardwood floor in 4 sharp steps, her face flushed with sudden anger. "What? Why on earth wouldn't you sign it?" she demanded. "Because this is Mom and Dad's residential home, Jocelyn, and I will not allow you to put their shelter at risk for a luxury house in Maple Ridge. It is a pure legal formality, Myra," Jocelyn hissed, lowering her voice desperately. "We already explained that to you." "You didn't explain a single thing to me," I stated cleanly, my voice echoing for every guest to hear. "You invited me to this anniversary dinner not to celebrate our parents, but because you desperately required my signature on a loan document to bail out your mortgage application." The surrounding tables fell into absolute, dead silence. Heads turned sharply from every corner of the room. My mother pushed her way through the guests from the buffet line, her artificial smile completely gone, her eyes wide with panic. "Myra, do not cause a public scene right now," she commanded sharply. "Just help your sister." "Mom, 2 days ago you explicitly told me not to attend tonight because my bankruptcy would ruin the mood of your party," I said, keeping my tone entirely level and factual. "Now I am standing here because Jocelyn needs my legal signature. Which is it? Am I a daughter, or am I just a financial tool for this family?" The words landed in the room like a heavy stone dropped into a quiet pool. I could feel the sharp shift in the room's energy, the uncomfortable shuffling of chairs, the collective intake of breath, and the rapid exchange of shocked glances between neighbors who suddenly realized this was not a family disagreement, but a public exposure. Jocelyn stepped directly into my face, her posture rigid, her voice trembling with rage. "You are so extraordinarily selfish, Myra. You have always been selfish." My father stood up from the cake table, his wooden chair scraping loudly against the floor, his face pale and tight. "Myra. Please," he choked out, his voice cracking with embarrassment. "Don't do this, don't make your mother upset in front of everyone." I turned my head and looked at my father, the man who had handed me a dead field of clay 20 years ago, who had never once visited the farm I bled for, and who had spent his entire life enabling my mother's cruelty. "Every single time you utter those words to me, Dad," I said softly, "I lose whatever remaining respect I had left for you." Across the room at table 3, Barbara Jenkins set her wine glass down on the table with a loud clatter and asked loudly, "What on earth is going on over there, Patty?" Jocelyn completely snapped. Her face turned a violent, blotchy red, not the red of embarrassment, but the dangerous red of an arrogant person whose public illusion has just been shattered. "Do any of you have any idea what my life has been like?" Jocelyn shouted, turning away from me to address the entire room of 40 guests. "My whole life, all I ever heard was Myra's organic farm this, and Myra's hard work that. Every time someone in this town mentioned her name, it was like I didn't even exist." My mother grabbed her arm frantically. "Jocelyn, stop talking right now." But Jocelyn violently shook her mother's hand off, her voice rising to a scream. "I am the daughter with the real college degree. I am the oldest. And she just digs in the dirty clay, and everyone in this town treats her like she's some kind of hero. You were only ever special because you had money, Myra. And now you have absolute nothing. So what are you now? An absolute, suffocating silence descended over the rosewood grill. The hum of the kitchen refrigerator was the only sound remaining in the room. A waiter standing near the kitchen door froze, holding a tray of drinks, as 40 high society guests stared in total horror at my sister unraveling in front of her parents' anniversary cake. From table 3, Loretta Briggs slowly stood up from her chair. She didn't raise her voice, she didn't need to. Her tone carried the absolute, razor-sharp authority of a woman who had commanded respect for 50 years. "Jocelyn," Loretta said, her voice cutting through the silence like an iron blade, "you just informed this entire room that your sister only possessed human value to this family when she had money to give you. Did you actually hear the words that just left your mouth?" Jocelyn's mouth opened, but no sound came out. My mother stepped forward, her chin thrust out defensively, pointing an angry finger at me. "This is entirely Myra's fault. She walked in here tonight specifically to humiliate our family in public. Myra hasn't uttered a single disrespectful word, Patty," Loretta's voice replied cleanly, her eyes locking onto my mother. "Your daughter asked a simple, honest question, and your other daughter just answered it for the entire town to hear." I stood quietly in the center of the room. I took a slow breath, smoothed down my dark blouse, and pushed my chair back gently, the quiet, deliberate movement of a woman closing a door she would never open again. "I am not bankrupt," I announced clearly to the room. The entire room held its breath. "I sold my commercial farm to Meridian Agricorp 3 weeks ago for $10.5 million, I stated, every word echoing with absolute, unassailable truth. The final contract was signed in Attorney Douglas Whitfield's office on a Tuesday morning. My husband asked me to tell my family that I had lost everything, not to deceive them, but to observe how they would treat me when they believed I had nothing left to offer them." My mother's face turned from furious red to a ghostly, sickly white. The blood completely drained from her features all at once. Away into absolute freedom. In less than 24 hours after I told them I was broke, I continued, looking directly at my mother, "You uninvited me from this anniversary dinner, stating that my failure would stain your party." I looked at Jocelyn. "You blocked my phone number, and then unblocked it only when you realized you needed my signature for a loan." I looked at my father. "And Dad, you sat in the group chat and said absolutely nothing to defend me." I pulled out my phone, illuminating the screen for the guests at the surrounding tables to see. And in the family group chat, Mom typed, "Nobody lend her a single dime, she did this to herself." Nancy Feldman covered her mouth with both hands in shock. Barbara Jenkins leaned forward, shaking her head in utter disgust. My mother's voice came out as a strangulated whisper, You lied to us." "I did not lie, Mom," I corrected her gently. "I told you I had lost everything, and within 24 hours, this family proved that I was right. I had lost everything, just not money." I reached into my purse, pulled out the printed email chain, and held it up. "There is one final truth this room needs to hear," I said, looking dead at my father. 6 months ago, Dad, a representative from the county assessor's office forwarded an email to you stating that Meridian Agricorp was willing to buy my organic land for a life-changing fortune. You forwarded that email directly to Mom. Neither of you ever uttered a single word about it to me. You kept it completely secret, because you knew that if I sold the farm and realized my true wealth, I would finally stop giving you money. You kept your playbook running to bleed me dry. My father stood paralyzed, his hands hanging limply at his sides. He did not offer a single denial, because he knew the printed paper in my hand contained his exact email address. He stood there looking smaller, older, and more broken than I had ever seen him, a 67-year-old man standing in a rented banquet room, watching his family's elaborate facade collapse into absolute dust. From table 3, Loretta Briggs's voice carried across the room, final and absolute. "Everyone in this town has watched you take money from Myra for 20 years, Patty. Do not sit there and pretend it was anything other than pure greed. I folded the Meridian sale receipt, placed it back into my leather purse, and zipped it shut. I offered no dramatic gestures, no shouting, and no tearful outbursts. I didn't come here tonight for revenge, I said to the silent room. I came because my mother claimed this dinner was about family, and a small part of me wanted to believe her. But this family carries a condition I will no longer fulfill. I am only allowed to be a daughter if I am writing checks and keeping silent while my hard work is stolen. Starting tonight, I am never giving a single dollar, or a single second of my life, to any of you ever again. I turned to table 3, looking at Loretta. Thank you for always seeing me, Loretta, I said softly. Loretta's eyes glistened with tears as she offered a proud, loving nod. Marcus stepped up beside me, buttoned his suit jacket, and placed his hand gently against the small of my back. We turned our backs on my family and walked calmly down the center aisle toward the exit doors. The room was so completely silent that the sound of my boots against the hardwood echoed clearly, the sound of a woman walking away from her past. Nobody called my name, nobody followed us, and nobody attempted to stop us. Outside, the cool night air hit my face, clean and refreshing. Marcus opened the passenger door of the truck for me, and I climbed inside. He started the engine, looked across the seat at me, and asked softly, "Are you okay, Myra?" I leaned my head back against the leather headrest, feeling a heavy, 20-year weight permanently lift off my chest. For the very first time in my entire life, Marcus, I answered with a genuine smile, I am completely, truly okay. In the weeks that followed, the consequences of their own choices completely consumed my biological family. Without my signature, First Prairie Lending immediately rejected Jocelyn and Todd's mortgage application, causing them to forfeit their non-refundable $40,000 cash deposit on the Maple Ridge estate. Todd subsequently discovered that Jocelyn had secretly taken out $25,000 in high-interest credit card cash advances to fund her deposit, leading to their permanent marital separation. My mother was socially ostracized by her church community and bridge clubs after the truth of the anniversary dinner spread through town, while my father walked 3 miles to my new property weeks later to offer a tearful, broken apology, admitting that he had been a coward his entire life. Marcus and I established an irrevocable legal trust for our $10.5 million, ensuring that my toxic family would never have legal access to a single penny, and we placed $50,000 into a restricted education fund specifically for my niece Brianna, so she could attend university without depending on her mother. We purchased a peaceful 200 acres in Cedar County, building a modest, beautiful farm where we grow organic produce, raise chickens, and host Loretta for weekend dinners on our front porch. I spent 20 years believing that I had to allow my family to bleed me dry just to earn their love, only to discover that the greatest moment of my life was the day I finally realized I owed them nothing, stood on my own 2 feet, and walked away into absolute freedom.